For this video, we're going to start with our word problem section by talking about simple interest and using it to help us understand a couple problems with rate and that sort of idea. So to start off, simple interest is interest that is only calculated by collecting interest on the initial investment. So let's say you put $100 in your bank account, and it keeps incurring maybe a cent every month or something like that. It's not going to accumulate. So every time you get interest, it will only be on that $100 or that initial principal that you put in. So P is going to stand for our principal, which is how much you initially put in. R is going to be your interest rate, usually given as APR or APY. And the key there is you always have to change your percentage to a decimal by moving the decimal place to the left twice. Okay, and then T will just be your time in years you're putting it into your account. So let's get started with our first problem. So Latoya Johnson borrowed $5,240 for new furniture. She will pay it off in 11 months at an annual simple interest rate of 4.5%. How much interest will she pay? So for this problem, we want to go ahead, since it says simple interest, we know we have to use the simple interest formula. So we're going to get our pen here, change it to a more appropriate color instead of red, because that can be depressing. And we go, okay, well, I know I need to use the formula interest equals PRT. And we need to identify which each of these variables stand for. So the first item is $5,240, first number. Now we have to decide, what is that? Well, that's how much she's taking out for the loan, so that'll be her principal. So I know that's going to be $5,240. And then let's see, what's the next? 11 months. Well, the time is, it has to be in years. So 11 months. How many years is that? Or, yeah, I know that sounds funny because you're like, it's not even a whole year, right? It's a fraction of a year. So how many months in a year? There's 12, right? So this would actually be 11/12 of a year, if you want to think of it that way. And it says the annual simple interest rate, so it tells us the rate is 4.5%, so that'll go in for our R. However, it's a percentage, so 4.5%, we need to change that into a decimal, so we need to take that decimal and move it to the left 2 spots, so this is actually 0.045. So we just put a 0 in for that empty spot there. So we're going to put in 0.045. And once we have that, we can go ahead and just calculate our interest. So we have 5,240 times 0.045. Be careful about those zeros when you're typing it into the calculator, because it's easy to mess that one up. And then 11/12 of a year. Okay, so just grab our interest. So 5,240 times 0.045. Double check that I typed it in correctly. Times 11 divided by 12. You should get interest equals $216.15. So that would be our interest. However, we need to, what if it asks for something like, well, how much is in the account? Well, if they ask for how much was in the account, you'd have to take that initial principal and just add it to our interest to get the total of amount, which would be, we can figure this out quickly, $5,456. So in less than a year, you made a pretty good chunk of change there. That's not normal interest rate. Let me tell you that. Okay, so that's our first problem. Let's go ahead and do something a little more complicated, but just stick with me. So an artist has sold a painting for $410,000. He needs some of the money in 6 months and the rest in a year. So he can get a treasury bond for 6 months at 4.65% and one for a year at 4.91%. His broker tells him the two investments will earn a total of $14,961. How much should be invested at each rate to obtain that amount of interest? So, there's a lot going on here. First thing you need to notice is that he has a total of $410,000 to invest. So he's going to his broker, he's going, here's $410,000, invest it for me. But I need some of the money back in 6 months, and I need some of the money back in a year. So I'm going to have to split it. So the amount invested in the first account is going to be X. We don't know how much he put into that first account. But we know that the second account, these two accounts together have to add up to 410,000. So you have account X and account Y. Well, I know they have to add up to 410,000. So X is just X, right? How much you're investing in X. But this is going to be how much you're investing into Y. How did they find that? Well, they just subtracted X over on this side, and you see that Y equals 410,000 minus X. So how much money you have left over to invest into your second account. So they've done the work for us. We don't have to do any work. I'm just showing you where it comes from so that we understand it a little bit more. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is what they did is they separated and they said, okay, well, let me make the first account the interest rate 4.65 and the second account is 4.91. It doesn't matter which one you place these. They could have been switched. It's okay, just as long as you're consistent. And then you see with the 4.65 percent account, we're only investing it for 6 months. So how many years is that? Well, that's 6/12, which is 0.5. And what they did is they said, okay, I'm going to take my interest equals PRT. So let me write that out here. I equals PRT. And I'm just going to calculate the interest on my first account. So I'm going to take my principal, which is X, your amount you invested, multiply it by my rate. Notice they changed it to a decimal by moving that decimal to the left 1, 2 spots and putting in a 0 there. So 0.465. And then I multiply it by my time, which is 0.5. So they've come up with the interest formula for you. So I'm going to call this interest 1. How much money we made in the first account. That was only the 6-month account. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing for the other account. We've already talked about how we found the principal. And then the interest rate, of course, we have to change to a decimal. So again, we move that over 2 spots to the left, and it's 0.0491. So you have your principal, 410,000 minus X. Notice they did throw that in parentheses. That's going to be very important, okay? And you have your rate, and then the time that's in that account is 1 year. So this is the interest rate of the second account. Now, you have 2 interest rates. Well, what do you know about these 2 interest rates? Go back to the problem. Well, the problem says, let's see, his broker tells him the 2 investments will earn, let me get my highlighter, 2 investments will earn a total of $14,961. So what does it mean to total? Well, total means that you should add the 2 interests together. So let's take interest 1, add it with interest 2, and it should total up to be, what did they say, $14,961. So let's actually plug in. My first interest was X times 0.0465 times 0.5 plus, this is going to get a little crowded. So let's just write it in, 410,000 You could simplify this before you write it all out. It's really up to you. Okay, I don't have enough room to write equals 14,961, but just imagine it says that at the end. So let's simplify the first part. We can just multiply those two numbers together, right? Associative property tells us we can multiply in any order, times 0.5, which gives us 0.02325x. Throw a 0 in front of there if you want to, no big deal. Okay, now for this one, you want to be careful because there's two terms in this one. So we want to go ahead and first multiply the guy without any addition or subtraction. So 1 times 0.0491 is just going to get you 0.0491. 1 times anything is that anything. So let's go ahead and take this guy and now distribute him to each term. Gotta make sure we're doing that. So 410,000 times 0.0491. I messed up earlier because I forgot a 0. It's super easy to do, so please do not do that because it creates more work for you. Nobody wants more work, right? Okay, so now we have the right answer, 20,131. That looks much better. And then minus 0.0491x equals 14,961. Okay, because that was what was equal that we talked about earlier. Now let's go ahead and combine those x's. So 0.0325 minus 0.0491. That's a 9. That looks even worse. Oh no. Okay, so anyways, you get negative 0.02585x. Why are my numbers looking so terrible? Let's go ahead and just move that constant to the other side. So 14,961 minus 20,131 is going to give you negative 20,130. Oh. That's not right. Hold on, guys. Don't use decimals. When you're trying to subtract, let's not do that and get an answer which actually seems a little bit more reasonable. Does that sound good to everybody? Yeah? Okay, great. So let's go ahead and actually get the right answer. Negative 5,000. I lost my pen. 5,170. Divide that by the coefficient, negative 0.02585. So we get a pretty answer, which is pretty reassuring. We get 200,000, which is your dollars. Now, I know it's super tempting when you get to an answer to be like, that's my answer, I'm done, yay! Because you're super excited to get a number and you hope it's right. But please, please, please go back and make sure that you answered all questions. This is the biggest thing I take off for when I'm grading is that somebody forgot to answer all of the questions asked. So let's go back. It says, usually just reading that last sentence. So how much should be invested at each rate to obtain the amount of interest? So we have the amount that should be invested in our 4.65% rate. However, how much should be invested in the 4.91% rate or the year-long investment? Okay, so remember that he has a total of $410,000 to spend. So if he's already invested $200,000, that means in the other account, we should take $410,000 and just subtract $200,000. So we're going to get $210,000 buckaroos that can go into that second investment. So it seems like they're pretty even investments there. So as you're going through the simple interest formulas, please, please make sure you're just staying organized, and always going back and rereading the question to make sure you've answered all of the items. So good luck with this part of the written assignment, and hopefully you guys see the point of doing a little simple interest in there. Good luck!